we have self-energy in IFS, which, we have these 8C qualities, 5P qualities, so many letter qualities. When that aspect of our being comes in contact with parts of us that are maybe holding affliction or maybe wilding out or whatever it is, those parts start to be reparented, right? Those
That's right.
parts start to feel held. Those parts start to shift their presentation. Those parts, just as anybody else would if they were in the presence of a caring, attuned person. So this inner reparenting starts to naturally unfold. In Buddhism, the awakened state correlates with what's called Buddha nature, who we really are at the bottom of it all. So self-energy, same. We're talking about the exact same thing. And the Sanskrit word, or term rather, for Buddha nature doesn't translate literally to Buddha nature. Tathagata Garbha is the Sanskrit term, which translates to the womb of awakened intelligence. And the womb aspect of it correlates with this reparenting business.
Going Inside is a podcast on a mission to help people heal from trauma and reconnect with their authentic self. Join me, trauma therapist John Clark, for guest interviews, real-life therapy sessions, and soothing guided meditations. Whether you're navigating your own trauma, helping others heal from trauma, or simply yearning for a deeper understanding of yourself, Going Inside is your companion on the path to healing and self-discovery. Download free guided meditations and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarktherapy.com. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Ralph De La Rosa is a psychotherapist and longtime meditation instructor. He's the author of 3 books about healing through meditation and IFS, including the forthcoming Outshining Trauma, a new vision of radical compassion. His work has been featured in the New York Post, CNN, Tricycle, GQ, Women's Health, and many more. Himself a survivor of PTSD, mental illness, and addiction, Ralph sees his work as an extension of his own path of transformation. Ralph, thank you for being here. Usually I start with the question of what else should people know about who you are and how you got here? So I'll offer you that question too. And I'm also really eager to ask you some of my questions about your book that I just recently started wrapping up.
Yeah, it's definitely good to be here with you, and definitely good to be representing this powerful work that we have in common for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'll give you my whole story is out there everywhere online, but I mean, to give you kind of the synopsis, I'm a trauma survivor. I'm multiple complex trauma survivor. A lot of bullying growing up. Dad abandoned my family. I mean, just to give you a brief inventory. And, the bullying became severely violent in high school to the point where I dropped out and just kind of internalized the story of I'm a nobody. I sort of belong in the gutter. And also that was one part of me. And I had another part that was a spiritual seeker and this cannot be it. This cannot be why we're here to just get banged up and then to pass that on to others around us. And, so through young adulthood, there was a big exploration with both drugs and spirituality simultaneously, and kind of a view that both were sort of the same thing. They were like a way out where that made you feel better and put you in control of your emotions, right? And neither of those things checked out. Right? So, and then that just got worse and worse until I hit bottom and had to get serious about some things. And then in getting serious about some things, having to go to rehab and having a trauma therapist and discovering Buddhist meditation, which isn't about a way out, actually. It's about a way in and through, and doesn't offer you, at least the form that I started exploring, doesn't really offer you too much. Just make friends with yourself, that was really the origin. And then here we are 20 years later from that moment somehow.
Yeah.
And I kind of just planned on being a broke social worker forever, working with kids. Yeah, it was a good path. I don't, not sustainable path, but
A noble one. Yeah.
And somehow my work just started getting attention. I was a meditation teacher first, and then the offer to start writing books just came at a moment that there was, I think, post-pandemic, it's different out here in the mental health world.
Yeah.
Uh, 10 years ago, there was a dearth of younger voices that could speak fluently to both spirituality and psychology and the trauma lens and what have you. There it wasn't as prevalent now. And so I was kind of, maybe for the first time in my life, was like right place, right time, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yes,
I
but
want to congratulate you on this new book that I have here. Thank you for sending me this advanced reader copy, which is kind of cool. It's like a secret mission. And I have to tell you, I was so engaged by the book. I was also entertained by it at times, of your stories, your personal anecdotes, your humor. I felt like I have a sense of who you are through reading your book. I also resonate with the kind of punk rock parts of you. I'm also a musician, and as a kid, I was like into emo music and punk and all those things. So I have so many parts that are resonating with just who you are in your story, and these, as overused as this is, like nuggets of wisdom about trauma, I was like pulling them out and documenting them. And one I wanted to start with here was um, was this quote: um, "As trauma survivors, we tend to mistake chaos, drama, impulsivity, and epic experiences for home." And then along these lines, and in the realm of integrating IFS and Buddhism, you go on to talk about this idea. I'm sure I'll say it wrong. Upekkha
Mhm.
is self-led trust in ourselves, and loving kindness offers a path home.
Yeah.
This was just really epic to me.
Mm.
Um, this whole quote, this whole idea. This was like when I felt like I was getting into the meat of the book, and I was really eager to see how you were going to tie these worlds together of Buddhism and IFS. But I guess, what's your reaction, like hearing that quote back to you, both like the trauma piece, which I think is so illustrative of the lived experience of trauma, and also this Buddhist principle that's one of many Buddhist principles that you bring into the book.
Yeah, we mistake our sense of home, right? Like our sense of home gets conditioned in our first home, really. And our first home isn't just the childhood home with our caregivers. It's also, the schools we went to and community institutions and what have you that we were involved in. And what the goings on there, can become so normal to our nervous systems and so normal to our parts. And I was talking to somebody about the Stanford prison experiment the other day. And if a listener doesn't know what that is, Google it. It's very fascinating. It has a lot to tell us about our cultural, socio-political moment right now, I think,
Mm-hmm.
actually. But one of the outcomes of that very, very famous study was like the sense of identity, the sense of the self-concept, who your parts think that you are and how life
Yeah.
works is like one of the most powerful motivators. And it can cut through our sense of ethics or just, it can cut through so many things. And so if we develop a self-concept around like, my home is, high drama, high stress, lots of chaos, lots of interruptions, etc., we can go on for the rest of our lives thinking that that's actually the case. But that's just an adaptation to abuse and neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, and I think a lot of trauma survivors find this with meditation at first is like, oh, this is boring. You know,
Yeah.
there's nothing going on here for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, when I get curious about boredom, sometimes there is real boredom, but sometimes I find, no, actually, this is peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is just being centered, and this is just not a lot happening. And it's
Yeah.
unfamiliar territory for my parts. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
that's the outcome of healing and growth, though, too, is what we find through parts work is we can say to parts of us inside, that maybe believe stress and hustle is the way. Like, where did you
Yeah.
hear that for the first time?
Yeah.
And is that really an unassailable source?
Yeah. Well, and then
And
and then clients show up to therapy with those values, and they think, I'm gonna stressfully hustle my way through this healing, or I just need to get this thing out of me. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, it's a very basic idea that I know and love from Buddhism is accepting suffering as part of life. And a lot of our suffering comes from resisting that suffering, or the fact that suffering is part of life. I hear a lot of clients, and especially trauma clients, that have this sense of like, I shouldn't have to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. I need to be done with this, right? So I can go on with my life or go back to who I was, before this thing happened, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the picture.
Oh yeah, all the time. The
Yeah,
the prospective client that shows up in the consult with like, how long will this take?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's like, well, we ain't even looked under the hood yet.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
also,
can you guarantee me results? Can you guarantee me that
yeah,
you'll restore me to exactly who I was before this whole thing or whatever?
which is a noble stance, I
Of
think.
course,
There's wisdom in
of
that. Of
course.
course, we want that.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, one thing I'll say that has blown my doors open about IFS is um, the discovery that healing isn't necessarily a process of like, checking off a bunch of boxes of what's wrong or addressing symptoms per se. It's actually the byproduct of getting to know yourself in a very deep way and at an increasingly granular level, a little bit at a time, of course, but get to know yourself in a profound way in the atmosphere of curiosity and compassion.
Yeah.
And the healing just kind of unfolds around you. And, to me, that's just so much more doable
Yeah.
than like the list approach or the, addressing symptoms approach.
Yeah. I've started to ask more and more people, more of my guests on the show, about their own definitions of self energy, self and self energy. Um, a quote from the book is, self energy is synonymous with the awakened state. Uh, what does that mean? And what's your experience and current working definition of self energy?
Yeah, this is like my favorite topic. My favorite topic. So, um, yeah, what was it? You asked me for two. I got a little bit excited there. There
Um,
was two questions at the end there.
yeah, this self energy is synonymous with the awakened state. Basically, what does that mean? Or for all of us, what is the awakened state, and from the Buddhist perspective, and and then just expanding on, yeah, your own definition of self energy.
Yeah, so when we touch in on self energy, and if a listener hasn't experienced this yet directly, this might sound a little odd. It's something that really has to be tasted before you can hear a description of it that really lands with you. But we also all have had many experiences already of self energy. It's that moment when the stress calms. It's that moment when we, maybe go for a hike in nature and we sit down after, for a rest, and we look out and something in us has shifted and we feel a little closer to who we actually are. It's that place that we touch in life where we're not reacting or behind the ball anymore, but we actually, you know, can settle into what I think is really the heart space. When there's space inside of us, when things are less crowded, it's less like Times Square and a little more like maybe Central Park, or hopefully more like Prospect Park for the New Yorkers out there. But the awakened state is that place where you let go of all of those things that are attached to your name and all of those different roles you play and all of the running around and hustling and trying to be somebody. It's just what's there. It's what we're left with when all of that stuff somehow seems to settle or step aside. And so self energy, right? Self energy correlates very much with, in Buddhism, I mean, the awakened state. Here's a cool correlation. Um, we have self energy, right? In IFS, which we have these 8C qualities, 5P qualities, so many letter qualities. which for me is really that space inside. It's just this clear, open thing in the back of my heart that can expand out and connect to whatever parts of me are present, can connect to whoever the person in front of me is, or
Yeah.
people, as the case may be. Right? It's what Ram Dass called the compassionate witness, right? And what's interesting about that is when we experience this directly all the time, that when that aspect of our being comes in contact with parts of us that are maybe holding affliction or maybe wilding out or whatever it is, those parts start to be reparented, right? Those
That's right.
parts start to feel held. Those parts start to shift their presentation. Those parts, just as anybody else would if they were in the presence of a caring, attuned person, right? So this inner reparenting starts to naturally unfold. And here's that cool correlation. In Buddhism, I mentioned a minute ago, is in Buddhism, the awakened state correlates with what's called Buddha nature, who we really are at the bottom of it all. So self-energy, same. We're talking about the exact same thing. And the Sanskrit word, or term rather, for Buddha nature doesn't translate literally to Buddha nature. Tathagata Garbha is the Sanskrit term, which translates to the womb of awakened intelligence. And the womb aspect of it correlates with this reparenting business, right? Like the space that naturally, automatically nurtures, helps things mature, helps, again, our core beliefs kind of get sorted out. Yeah, it's really become my favorite thing to talk about, my favorite thing to teach people how to get to, because it is so powerful. And with enough practice, you really can get quite rather quickly, really,
Yeah.
to a place where you can experience directly for yourself what I'm talking about, that energy spreading through the body, spreading out to the room you're in, and
Yeah.
what have you. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can say one more thing,
Yeah.
um, what really sparked me up about IFS, having been a pretty hardcore Buddhist for a lot of years, in the moment that I found Jay Early's self-therapy book in my two little hands, was in Buddhism, it's taught, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while, maybe lifetimes, till you experience the kind of thing that I was just so casually talking about. In
Mm-hmm.
IFS, they're like, nah, here's the steps. You can
Yeah.
have that now.
It's here and now. Yeah. Yeah.
Why
No
would it be
relief.
any other way?
Yeah.
You know? Why would it
Yeah.
be any other way? Yeah.
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 Yeah. Building off of that, like this idea of kind of like becoming myself or self-actualizing or reaching enlightenment or whatever the goals of you know uh, spiritual practices are, whatever the goal of IFS may be, like how do you help your clients understand that, or what's your understanding of like the goal or the goal
I
in your life?
That's a really good question, and I will have to check back with you when I have a
Okay,
clearer
sounds good.
answer.
We'll do a part two. Yeah.
I'll say this much. I have what I call enlightenment within reach, because the technical definitions of enlightenment in Buddhism are very nuanced and difficult to understand if you're not a practitioner, and they also vary from school to school. But
Hmm.
so enlightenment within reach, like something we can actually, a layperson can begin to grasp and orient themselves around, is imagine this: you do enough healing that your inner child parts begin to reclaim the best of their childlike qualities: wonder, joy, spontaneity, uninhibitedness, sweetness, playfulness, like endless imagination. Like when you were a kid and you could just like self-entertain with two rocks and make up a million stories about what those rocks actually were, and for hours if you needed to. Like that kind of imagination. You
Mm.
reclaim that sort of vitality as well. but in the context of the best of maturation, right? The best of adulthood. So emotional intelligence, communication skills, financial intelligence, go down the line of things that make an adult life really work. And then those two things being able to coexist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're in your childlike spontaneity and wonder, but you're not an idiot. And
Yeah.
you are in your full maturation as an adult, but you haven't shut down, what I think is like the really good stuff in life.
Like, a part of me says it feels like a rare combo. Um, I remember when I was in high school and I had a lot of issues as a kid, as a teenager, and I got in a lot of trouble. And my therapist was uh, literally saved my life. But I remember even as a high schooler, parts of me felt very serious, like I had to be really responsible. Other parts of me fought that and rebelled quite significantly. Um,
Mhm.
and even a few years out of high school, I would go back and see my therapist at home. And a couple years into college, he told me, you know what you need? Like, your homework is to go home and just play, whatever that means. Like, do something without an objective. And for whatever reason, right, and all my parts and my managers had just become so obsessed with like advancing myself or a skill, or even for me as a musician, been playing drums since I was 10. At times, playing drums has been ruined for me because every time I sit down, either my parts are too loud and they won't let me play, and I just think I suck and I'm not advancing. And if I can't be the best jazz drummer in the world, why do it? Or I think, well, it's only I have to be doing productive things, right? Like I have to be advancing myself as a drummer. And the past few years, I've been really trying to just play. And my 4-year-old daughter is a great inspiration for that because the first time I put her behind a drum set, she just plays and experiments and thinks it's cool and holds the sticks in a weird way, and just loves what she's playing. And I'm just like standing there with my mouth open, being like, I used to do this, and then being like, my new goal is to play drums tonight and like just play, just make sounds and be as playful as possible. And it's so hard for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're good at the mature aspect, right? The
Yeah,
rudiments, the progression, et
that's
cetera.
right.
And then the childlike aspect needs to be reclaimed. I'm kind of
That's
the
right.
opposite. Like I'm so, former metal goth
Yeah.
punk emo kid here as well, and I'm a drummer also, and I currently sing and play guitar in a post punk band, and um, I'm the opposite. I actually don't know the notes that my guitar strings are tuned to. I don't
Yeah.
know the names of chords. I have no training. I'm doing vocal training now, but that's the first time I've ever really had consistent lessons in 30
Yeah.
years of music, and so I'm too good at the childlike aspect and
Yeah.
need to bring
Yeah.
in some more of the
We
rudiments,
should
right?
probably jam then. That's probably what that means.
But but there was a time in my life where like I can relate, where I first read, and I can't remember where, that play is the opposite of anxiety. And this is pre-discovering IFS, and I was like, holy shit, like
Yeah.
the only thing I ever do for fun is go out for drinks with friends.
Yeah.
That's the only laughter in my life. That is
Yeah.
something that's oriented around alcohol, and
Yeah.
we got to work on that.
Yeah. Totally. Well, it's also that we can't be in curiosity and also anxious, right? And
Mhm.
so when we're helping clients connect with their self energy and just even asking directly, can you cultivate just a seed of curiosity inside and see what happens? That is a way to work from anxiety, to feel more calm, to feel less anxious, which is what most people want, right? But so much of therapy is about coming in and tamping down the symptoms and just breathe more, which is kind of a way of saying, can be a way of invalidating our fears or anxiety, or saying don't be ridiculous, just breathe, everything's fine, right? Or a lot of the messages from our well-intending parents of, just breathe, you'll be fine, I'm sure nothing bad will happen at school. It's like, but you don't know, right? And our parts are waiting for they're waiting for that reassurance, or they're at least waiting for the reassurance that regardless of what happens at school, I'm with you and we can get
Yeah,
through this together. Right.
that's powerful. That's powerful when somebody can provide you that. And if you didn't get it from your parents, hopefully you can get it from a therapist. And you can also become that for your parts inside,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen. I don't know I don't know half of what's going on in life. That's something a lot of people are terrified to admit, but it's true. None of us
Yeah.
really know what to do. All we have is trial and error and what we figured out so far. But I'll be here, like another definition of, I think, being self-led or that enlightenment within reach is like the cultivating a genuine, heartfelt sense of, I always have me. No matter what goes down, I
Yeah.
got me, you know.
Yeah. The only guarantee. And that self is enough. That's kind of the offer of IFS.
Mhm.
Also, talking shop for a second as therapists, and given that the state, the moment in time we're in right now, in the world, clients coming to us as therapists wanting to know, like, Ralph, tell me it's going to be okay. Right. And for some therapists, the temptation to want to reassure clients, or the pressure that clients put on us to want to tell them everything's going to be okay.
Yeah,
Um, you made a post on Instagram recently about how a lot of our training as therapists is about not bringing your stuff into the room, right? Or even going all the way back to Freud and this blank slate idea, right? It's like that wasn't that long ago, and a lot of models are built on that idea of blank slate. And yet here we are as people and real people in the room, and it takes a tremendous amount of energy and psychic effort to, like, not be a person in the room.
mhm.
um, so you were saying something in the post about how it's inevitable, it's impossible, biologically impossible, to not bring yourself into the room. How do you think of all that right now, and how does that look in your work?
Yeah, for one, we shouldn't be telling people that it's going to be okay because we just don't know. And it's just like the rule that you never make a promise to a kid that you can't
There you
like
go.
fulfill, you know?
Yeah.
Just like that, you can't promise that. We don't know what's going to happen. We really don't know. We know something's going to happen, but we really don't know. And
Yeah.
we're in that uncertainty together. And can I leave that outside the room? No, I can't. Now, some people hold the view that it is a service to the clients to be that tabula rasa blank slate. And I honor that 100%. That is a professional choice that can be a service to clients, um, I'm thinking to a moment when I asked a psychoanalyst that I worked with for several years. Um, I decided to ask him about himself one day. And he said, Ralph, you're pretty smart. And I'm pretty sure if I give you even anything, you're going to figure out how to use it.
Yikes.
I was so mad, and he was so right,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But but there are some of us that may feel more comfortable with another way. And for those folks, I want just highlight one of the reasons why I tell my story in my books, on podcasts, everywhere. Even though it was my training not to, in
Yeah.
both meditation and psychotherapy, is the power of normalization to undo shame. That is when I sense that a client is struggling with something and their story is so parallel to mine and there's shame in the room, that's when I'll just maybe say, hey, can I let you know something about me? Here's what happened with me that's so similar to this. I've been there too. In that moment, almost every time somebody's going to be like, the therapist has had what?
Yeah.
Okay, it's okay to be me again with
Yeah.
this. And that is when I started picking up on how powerful that was, is when I started breaking that rule. And with regards to the election, you know, um, I had a client write to me and say, I just remember the session we had after Trump got elected the first time, and you saying to me that you were scared too, and that you hugged me at the end of that session. And that was one of the most powerful things ever. And in that moment, I was breaking all the rules, but
Yeah.
intelligently, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in these moments where our devastation is matching the clients in some way, and sociopolitics is one thing, but we're also going to have people die in our lives, and all kinds of heartbreaks
Yeah.
unfold, and then have to show up in the therapy room with folks. I think the veil of separation is that much thinner in those times. Our interdependence is really laid more bare. We are truly at eye level with one another, and it's one of those. It's one of those things where if we think there's a hierarchy, if we think that it's, me helping you down there, that doesn't, to me,
Yeah.
that doesn't hold a match as us linking arms and walking together.
Yeah. I have to throw in another quote from your book. You're just throwing me a softball here, or whatever it's called, a layup. I don't know. The world will continue to burn, and while we can't save ourselves by covering it in leather, we can make a fantastic pair of sandals and help others to fashion their own. That was from this Buddhist principle, Shantideva. How do you say it?
Yeah, yeah, close enough. Shanti Dave. Yeah,
Shantideva.
yeah.
Yeah. Pretty powerful stuff.
In Buddhism, something that I'm really thankful for is the teachings on what's called samsara, which most of us have, is a Sanskrit word most of us have heard at this point. It just points to the cyclical nature of everything, the way that seasons go round and round, and our behavioral patterns go round and round. And but that samsara connotes something terrible as well, because that's, again, how trauma works is cyclical, and how our confusion works, and how violence works, and what have you. It's all cycles. And in the Buddhist, and well, really in the Indo-Tibetan sense, we'll say, samsara is endless. Samsara is, in other words, we're not going to fix the world. We're not going to get there. The human condition of fundamental confusion, and frankly having nervous systems that aren't wired for the 21st century. We have hunter-gatherer nervous systems. Hunter-gatherer nervous systems. That is where we are evolutionarily. So we're mismatched for this world. And yet, we also have the principle of the bodhisattva in Buddhism. And there's even a bodhisattva vow that one might take at a particular point in their journey. And the bodhisattva principle is, you literally vow to keep being reborn in this world and to not transcend this world until all the suffering is gone. And in that vow, you even acknowledge that it's going to be endless. And so you're kind of vowing to not transcend this planet, to not leave any beings behind, even though it's impossible.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that really speaks to our situation right now. It's like, even though, like, it's never been more dark, honestly. And even though it feels so impossible, even though there's so many shards of glass rushing towards us right now, we can still make a pledge, like, no, I'm going to stand here. I'm going to stand here. I'm not, and I'm going to be with my feelings about this. I'm going to process, but I am going to stand up, and I'm going to work towards what I believe to be right, and what I believe to be the compassionate resolution of this, no matter how impossible it feels, no matter how powerless I feel, no matter how minuscule the change that I perceive that I affect is. That's still worth it to me, because I'm in this one for the long haul.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about something else in here, which is, and this might need its own hour, so everyone keep in mind, for the sake of brevity, this idea of Buddhism and the self. or no self. And maybe a lot of it can be summed up with semantics between um, IFS and how we view the self. Um, Even this idea, or the part of the subtitle of your book, of self-compassion, right? I think of compassion as sending compassion from self to parts. But um, let me just stop there. This idea of the Buddhist definition of self versus the IFS definition of self.
Yeah. There's so many ways to come at this, and I'm going to give you a really brief
Yeah,
one.
this might be kind of a hairy one, huh?
Well, the Buddha said, the doctrine of no self, anatman, which was a confrontation of the Hindu notion that there is like kind of a person inside of you, like the
Mm,
real you is inside of you. And that person has, a fixed set of qualities and traits, and that's kind of how a lot of folks think of the soul. And so the Buddha said, no, that's not it. That's not it. But he didn't say there's not a true nature. He, in fact, taught heavily on, Buddha nature, our deeper nature, who we
mm,
truly are underneath it all. Except who we are truly underneath it all isn't really a who. In IFS, the corollary of self energy. First of all, when you experience that aspect of your being, there's not actually a personality there.
right.
It's an energy, and it doesn't have a fixed set of traits.
Yeah.
It can be calm, it can be curious, it can be playful, it gives rise to a wide array of things, and it's a dynamic force. It's not just
Yeah.
like some fixed stayed thing. We open to it, and it begins to exert its influence quite
Yeah.
effortlessly within the system. But it's not like a little person inside of you that's the real you. It's more fluid than that. And when you start to see that everybody has it, and that the earth has it, and that trees have it, that this is really kind of the energy that is behind our vitality, that makes everything live and grow, you start to realize calling it self is a misnomer.
Yeah, exactly.
It ain't personal. It's universal.
Yeah.
So no self.
That's a really good answer. Yeah, calling it a misnomer is helpful because again we have so many connotations around self or getting to know yourself. It's like I've always thought, what the hell does that mean? I don't, you know, again, even this idea of like self-compassion, which you know, I have clients that come in and go, well, I've been told, or I went to a yoga class and they said, be compassionate with yourself, but it's also like, how could I be compassionate with myself when I am drinking myself to death every night, or I just yelled at my partner, or I'm got this perfectionist part, or whatever it is, right? And a lot of clients, and especially around when we have core wounding from trauma, coming in and going like, telling you to do the exact opposite of what your inclination is. Like you should just love yourself, right? But there's parts that carry um, deep, deep fears around being unlovable, unworthy, and fundamentally broken, right? So this idea of like just be compassionate, just practice self-compassion or do self-care. Like these things become buzzwords and kind of lose meaning, but again, they can almost like trigger reactions in people of like, well, I certainly don't want to endorse my own bad behavior. I don't want to endorse my drinking, right? Because I know it's a problem, right?
Yeah, that ain't love.
Yeah,
Endorsing your drinking ain't love, right?
yeah,
Like, um,
yeah. And then the fear is if I get to know that part that likes to drink, I'll just be endorsing that part or condoning it, which is obviously we know not the case as IFS practitioners. But yeah, I'll stop there.
we connote love with approval because that's how so many of us were raised, right?
Yeah,
If
yeah,
I like what you're up to, you get the love vibe. If I don't, the love vibe gets shut down, right? And that ain't it. That ain't it. So here's a matter of semantics where just, a kind of turn of phrase sometimes can help us understand a concept in a different way. I think about it as offering the heart. Can you offer the heart to that part of you?
That's
Can
great.
you appreciate its struggle? That alcoholic part of you is in hell, that it can't get out and it thinks this is the only way. Doesn't that break you open a little bit for that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, offering the heart
Yeah.
is love, but our concepts about love are just, yeah, sometimes very, very confusing to, to apply.
Well, confusing, and as you pointed out, for many of us, largely conditional, right? When kids are good or more well behaved, they get more love, even from a teacher, right? When we're not that, love is withdrawn or withheld or held over our heads, right? As this carrot on a stick that we have to chase, right? And then, fast forward 2 decades later, in my case, having worked in private practice in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley for all these years, you have someone who has manager parts with incredible burdens around striving and perfectionism and being good and being the golden child. And if I can just be, the most successful 20-something-year-old in Silicon Valley, maybe I'll finally be more worthy of love, right? Maybe. And then they do it, and then they get there and they make the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and they've never felt more low in their lives, right? Or they go into a deep, deep depression around what the hell was the point of all that. Then they come to therapy, right?
Or become therapists.
Or become therapists. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
It's true. It's the other side of the coin, with regards to, sometimes when you talk about self-love, it's like, wait, you want me to be a Zenned out hippie? What you want? Like, you want me to just like be a Buddha on the hill?
yeah.
Yeah. How am I going to get things done? What am I going to do when my bills show up? I got taxes to pay, kids to raise, and everything else. So like, and this, I'm pretty sure this ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. What I want for you is what self-love means is like, can those parts of you that are engaged in worldly activities still do that, but also take a break sometimes so that they're rested and resourced for when you need them?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's part of it. That's part of the story, of a very long story.
A lot of what I try to do is help clients, especially somatically, feel the difference between self and parts. Not that the whole game is like parts are bad, self versus parts, but the sensation of, and I try to be as agnostic to their lives and their values as I can, meaning
Nice.
If a self-led decision and vision for their life is being the most successful 27-year-old venture capitalist, then I want to help you go and do that. But I also want you to feel what it's like, and even in your body, when that feels like a yes, when that feels like it's coming from a place of wisdom, that's my purpose in life and I want to head there, right? And for a lot of people, I just find that it's not. For people that are, quote, overachieving, I find that they have, again, parts with massive burdens, or they have trauma histories that have never been touched into whatsoever, right? If it feels extreme, if it feels like an impulse, right, it might be, coming from a part of you, and we can get to know that part right now, today, in this moment, right?
Yeah. I mean, but also sometimes there are things that we can only learn by making mistakes or by falling
100%.
that we need to learn, and we won't learn any other way,
Yeah. And as therapists, sometimes we want to save clients from those mistakes because we can see the writing on the wall, and then our own rescuer parts, right? Parts of savior complexes can jump in and overreaching and rescuing, and then burning out, crashing and burning, right? That's the risk.
Yeah, cannot take responsibility for someone else's path. We just walk with them, and that's it. That's it. I could tell us a personal story about that if you're game.
Sure.
I don't have to, but I sat a long silent meditation retreat once upon a time in Crestone, Colorado, and I got there and I didn't know why. I was just bugging out, like bad, like real bad, like could not sit still, could not meditate. It just was in hell. And after 2 days of it, I was like, I'm gonna have a psychotic break, honestly. Like, this is really intense. I don't know what's going on. Every part of me wants the hell out of here, and this really sucks. And in Buddhism, there's a rule: you do not leave retreat. If you leave retreat, you're disrupting the container. Affects everybody. Like, it's a big no. But I was wigging out in such a way that it was like being noticed, to where the retreat leader, I get a note passed to me, like, the retreat leader would like to see you. Oh God.
You could break the rule.
Right. And yeah, that's what he said to me. We went into this process around what was going on, and I was like, I don't want to leave because I'm feeling impulsive. That's not a reason to go. And he said, well, staying because you should isn't a good reason either. And he was the one who was like, yeah, maybe you need to make a big mistake here in order to learn something that you can't learn any other way. So why don't you get out of here? And getting that permission, I wanted to stay suddenly.
Paradox.
And it turned out, actually, in hindsight, I realized this like about a month later, like, oh, my parts, because of some things that, about how I was raised, really needed to be in their confusion, and to just have that witnessed in a place where people weren't reacting to it. And actually what the teacher did was so skillful, of like, I'm going to just offer you a way to work this out on your own. I grew up in an environment where I was constantly being told what to do, and constantly, because of my neurodivergence, my parents were very afraid that I was going to go the wrong way in so many different ways at so many different levels. And so there was a lot of redirection of like, that's weird. No, you can't be a musician. That's not going to make you any money. You got to be an architect. You're good at drawing. Do that. There was a lot of that growing up. And bless my mom, especially, who, she was coming from love and concern with that. But I needed a place where somebody said, here, I'll explore this with you, but
yeah,
you can break the rules now if that's what you actually need.
Yeah.
And then that put my nervous system at peace.
Yeah. I love that.
Paradoxes.
That permission to stay or go was what your parts needed to soften, and then kind of allow yourself to be in it.
And I had to do a silent meditation retreat totally wrong in order to get there as well. I had to basically be an asshole to everybody to get that.
Yeah. To your point, as therapists, we don't want to steal lessons away from our clients, right? These parts of us that want to save them from their suffering. Of course, again, we could do another episode on this. That's how a lot of therapists get into this field in the first place, right? As I was always the rescuer or the middle child or the peacekeeper or whatever, right? So that might be the thing that kind of got you to the dance. But you get 5 years into this, 10 years into this, that's not sustainable,
Yeah, you will definitely work way too hard.
Yeah.
And your parts will comment will comment through the process,
Yeah. Ralph, somehow we're getting close to time. I just want to again make a plug, because I think by the time this is out, your book will officially be available for people. Outshining Trauma, A New Vision of Radical Self-Compassion. The foreword is by Dick Schwartz himself. The book is on integrating internal family systems and Buddhist meditation. I guess, Ralph, with the couple minutes we have left, anything that you feel like is unsaid, at least for today, anything you want to leave people with or about your book, and then, how can people follow up and follow along with your work?
Yeah, I think it's important to always remind people that where you are right now is not, there's more to the story. Where you are right now does not determine, what's possible for you. It just determines your starting point, and you can go so much further in life. I went from heroin addict, $150 a day habit, lying in the gutter on the verge of homelessness, to this. And what? you know, there's so much that's possible. And with regards to the book, it's really about that. It's like starting exactly where you are. And this book in particular is different from my other books in that it's really kind of a guidebook for walking the path. And it's a fantastic accoutrement, especially if you're in therapy, but you don't have to be, and how to turn your daily life into a healing path to supercharge that process. And so we start from the very beginning, and we get all the way up to the more refined IFS and processes and Buddhist worldview in tandem as well. We find synchronicity throughout the whole thing. And then to find me is easy. It's ralphdelarosa.com or Ralph De La Rosa 108 on TikTok, or Ralph De La Rosa on Instagram, and lots of online courses, lots of free stuff. Lots of offerings, like kind of exploding out of me these days. So
yeah, I love it. Ralph, thank you so much again. I really love the book. It's both informative and in some parts very technical and gets into the nitty gritty, which I really love as a therapist, but also it becomes very practical, and a lot or most, if not all, chapters have a meditation at the end, which is really neat. And so I even like your idea of having folks record that text and use it for their own meditation. I think that's a really nice way to use the book. So, and again, just the sheer understanding and your grasp on trauma, what it is and how it affects people, is tremendous. So in reading this, I'm like, Ralph has a serious grasp on what this stuff is and how we can help people through it. So kudos to you for all the work. And I know that years you've spent developing these ideas and picking up on these things from your work with trauma clients. So thank you for this contribution. And I'm excited for people to get their hands on it.
It's extremely gracious. And so thank you. Thank you for reading the book and being a fantastic interviewer as well. And I'll just say it takes one to heal one, It takes one to heal one. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome back anytime, Ralph. Thank you again for doing this. And keep in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Going Inside. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and share your favorite episode with a friend. You can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at John Clark Therapy, and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarktherapy.com. See you next time.